Pat Cipollone, Donald Trump's White House counsel, just wrapped up more than 7 hours of testimony to the January 6th committee. Now, that interview took place on Capitol Hill behind closed doors, was, of course, recorded on video. Committee member Zoe Lofgren says that Cipollone was cooperative and revealed new information that we will get to here in upcoming hearings.
Mr. Cipollone did appear voluntarily and answer a whole variety of questions. He did not contradict the testimony of other witnesses. And I think we did learn a few things, which we will be rolling out in hearings to come. So I think it was a grueling day for all involved, Mr. Cipollone and the staff and the members, but it was well worth it.
Now, new reporting suggests the committee continues to collect more evidence and that more Republican witnesses have been coming forward. So they may extend those hearings beyond next week. But this interview with Cipollone is one of the committee's biggest breakthroughs yet. He is, of course, a key witness who, as we know from previous hearings, repeatedly tried to stop Donald Trump from going through with the coup. He has the potential to be the John Dean of this investigation because, well, in fact, Dean himself, President Nixon's White House counsel, was the one who broke open the Watergate investigation in 1973, and he had urged Cipollone to speak out. And it really is an amazing turn of events that Pat Cipollone is now in this position. Donald Trump hired Cipollone at the end of 2018, and that was to replace his first White House counsel, Don McGahn. Now, Trump became dissatisfied with McGahn after he tried to prevent the ex-president from committing potential crimes. McGahn went on to cooperate extensively with the special counsel, Robert Mueller's investigation. And so for his next White House counsel, Trump wanted a true loyalist, a soldier. He chose Cipollone, a right-wing Republican, conservative Catholic, who was Fox host Laura Ingraham's spiritual mentor before her conversion to Catholicism. And for a time, Cipollone played the part. He was Trump's lead attorney in Trump's first impeachment trial, which, you will remember, was about the ex-president's attempt to corruptly misuse his power for his own political benefit. He solicited foreign help through the threat of extortion, essentially, to interfere in a free and fair election. And the Democrats argued at the time that this was not someone who could be trusted with the powers of government, because Trump refused to play by the basic rules of democracy. He refused to, fundamentally, at a core level, accept free and fair elections. In fact, he wanted to prevent them from happening.
Can we be confident that he will not continue to try to cheat in that very election? Can we be confident that Americans and not foreign powers will get to decide, and that the president will shun any further foreign interference in our democratic affairs? And the short, plain, sad, incontestable answer is no, you can't. You can't trust this president to do the right thing, not for 1 minute, not for one election, not for the sake of our country. You just can't. He will not change, and you know it.
But Pat Cipollone, in his role as defender of the president, countered that it was the Democrats, actually, who were the ones imperiling democracy by trying to impeach and remove Donald Trump.
What they are asking you to do is to throw out a successful president on the eve of an election with no basis and in violation of the Constitution. It would dangerously change our country and weaken forever all of our democratic institutions. The election is only months away. The American people are entitled to choose their president. Overturning the last election and massively interfering with the upcoming one would cause serious and lasting damage to the people of the United States and to our great country.
So Adam Schiff says Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to American democracy. You can't trust him. Pat Cipollone counters, no, no, no. Impeaching Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to American democracy. Well, we know who turned out to be right, didn't we? About the nature of Donald Trump and the real threat to democracy. And Pat Cipollone, like so many before him, belatedly realized that he was on the wrong side, too. Because he watched in real time as the ex-president attempted to end American democracy as you know it, to use the power of his office to foment a coup, to cause the first ever non-peaceful transfer of power. Cipollone was there in the White House as the first president in U.S. history tried to prevent that peaceful transfer of power by inciting a violent insurrection. And, to be clear, and to his credit, this conservative Trump loyalist, the man who stood up at the first impeachment trial and preached about the threat to democracy, tried his best, as far as we know, to stop the coup. When it really happened, when it really counted, it appears that Pat Cipollone did nearly everything he could, though short of speaking out publicly, to stop it. Over the past 6 committee hearings, we heard how Cipollone pushed back against Trump's efforts to use the Department of Justice to support his claims of election fraud. This is Assistant Attorney General Stephen Engel describing Cipollone's reaction when Trump tried to promote his loyalist Jeffrey Clark, who's prepared to issue a letter falsely claiming the DOJ had found evidence of fraud.
I said, Mr. President, I've been with you through 4 attorneys general, including 2 acting attorney general, but I couldn't be part of this. The story is not going to be that the Department of Justice has found massive corruption that would have changed the result of the election. It's going to be the disaster of Jeff Clark. And I think at that point, Pat Cipollone said, yeah, this is a murder-suicide pact, this letter.
Cipollone also pushed back against Trump's Trump lawyer John Eastman's infamous coup memo laying out the scheme for Mike Pence to essentially unilaterally overturn the election on January 6th.
The way it was communicated to me was that Pat Cipollone thought the idea was nutty and had at one point confronted Eastman basically with the same sentiment.
And last week, Cassidy Hutchinson told the committee how Cipollone warned her about the potential crimes Trump could commit if he led the mob to the Capitol on January 6th.
I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
And do you remember which crimes Mr. Cipollone was concerned with?
In the days leading up to the 6th, we had conversations about potentially obstructing justice or defrauding the electoral count.
Hutchinson also relayed to the committee what Pat Cipollone told her boss, Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, after the Secret Service stopped Trump from going to the Capitol, but the mob had made it there on their own.
And I remember Pat saying to him something to the effect of, the rioters have gotten to the Capitol, Mark. We need to go down and see the president now. And Mark looked up at it and said, he doesn't want to do anything, Pat. And Pat said something to the effect of, and very clearly had said this to Mark, something to the effect of, Mark, something needs to be done or people are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands.
People are going to die and the blood's going to be on your effing hands. Well, he was right about that. Now, we have seen this particular script over and over and over again. A conservative loyalist goes to work for Trump, realizes he's a monstrous sociopath, and then comes around and tells the story. The question that remains tonight, after hours and hours of testimony, is did Pat Cipollone really come clean?